It was a typical evening at the airport, with passengers bustling about, eager to reach their destinations. Among them was Sarah, a young woman traveling alone for the first time. She checked in her luggage, passed through security, and settled into her seat at the gate, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nervousness. As Sarah waited for her flight to board, she couldn't help but notice a peculiar figure lingering near the departure board. He stood out amidst the crowd, tall and lean, with a presence that seemed to exude an unsettling aura. His long coat draped around him, almost as if he were trying to blend in while simultaneously drawing attention to himself. But what caught Sarah's attention the most were his eyes' dark, piercing orbs that seemed to follow her every move. Despite the discomfort his gaze brought her, Sarah dismissed it as nothing more than her own paranoia. After all, airports were filled with all sorts of characters, and she was just being overly cautious. But as the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered in the pit of her stomach. As she made her way down the jet bridge and onto the plane, Sarah's nerves began to settle. She found her seat, stowed her carry-on in the overhead compartment, and settled in for the flight. But as the minutes passed and the plane began to fill with passengers, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Glancing over her shoulder, she caught sight of the mysterious figure from the terminal, now seated a few rows behind her. His eyes bore into her, sending a shiver down her spine. Disconcerted, Sarah turned away, trying to focus on the safety demonstration being played on the overhead screens. Throughout the flight, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she glanced back, the man was there, his gaze never wavering. She tried to distract herself with a book, with music, with anything to drown out the unsettling sensation crawling beneath her skin. But as the plane began its descent, Sarah's anxiety reached a fever pitch. The seat behind her was empty. The man had vanished without a trace. Panic seized her as she frantically scanned the cabin, her heart racing in her chest. She called out to the flight attendant, her voice trembling as she recounted the eerie encounters with the mysterious passenger. The flight crew sprang into action, conducting a thorough search of the plane upon landing, but their efforts yielded no results. There was no sign of the mysterious man, no clue as to where he had gone. Airport authorities were called in to investigate, but their inquiries turned up empty-handed as well. In the days that followed, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of the mysterious man. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his haunting gaze staring back at her. She couldn't help but wonder what had become of him, what secrets he carried with him into the night. To this day, the disappearance of the mysterious passenger remains a baffling mystery, haunting Sarah's every journey through the airport. And as she navigates the bustling terminals, she can't shake the feeling that she's being watched, that somewhere in the shadows, the man with the dark, piercing eyes is still there, waiting. If you're finding value in this video so far, do me a quick favor and hit that like button below. Enjoy. The airport terminal was bathed in the dim glow of fluorescent lights, casting long shadows across the polished floors as the last flights of the day came to an end. Among the weary travelers stood Emily, her fatigue evident in the sag of her shoulders and the bags under her eyes. She had just returned from a month-long trip abroad and was eager to finally be home. Emily stood by the baggage claim carousel, her eyes fixed on the rotating belt, waiting for her luggage to appear. Minutes turned into hours, and the terminal gradually emptied, leaving Emily alone with her thoughts and the low hum of the conveyor belt. She glanced at her watch, growing increasingly impatient as her suitcase failed to materialize. Just as Emily was about to give up hope, she spotted her suitcase emerging from the conveyor belt. Relief flooded through her as she reached out to grab it, eager to leave the airport and finally rest at home. But as her hand closed around the handle, a sudden chill ran down her spine. A feeling of unease washed over Emily as she lifted the suitcase off the carousel. It was as if a shadow had fallen over her, darkening the air around her. She shook her head, trying to dispel the strange sensation, but it lingered, gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. Ignoring her misgivings, Emily made her way out of the airport and hailed a taxi to take her home. But as the taxi pulled away from the curb, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if the suitcase carried with it a malevolent presence, a curse that threatened to engulf her. When Emily arrived home and opened the suitcase, she was greeted with a sight that made her blood run cold. Inside, nestled among her clothes, was a strange object, a small figurine carved from black stone, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It seemed to pulse with a dark energy, casting a shadow over the room. Terrified, Emily tried to rid herself of the cursed suitcase, but no matter what she did, it always seemed to find its way back to her. And as the days turned into weeks, strange things began to happen. Objects would go missing. Strange noises would echo through her apartment, and she would wake in the night to find the figurine watching her from across the room. Haunted by the curse that seemed to have latched onto her, Emily's life became a living nightmare. She tried everything to break free from its grasp, but the curse was relentless, its dark power growing stronger with each passing day. To this day, Emily lives in fear of the cursed baggage claim, haunted by the memory of that fateful night at the airport. And as she watches the carousel turn, she can't help but wonder if the next traveler to approach it will fall victim to the same dark forces that still linger in its depths. As the clock ticked past midnight, the airport terminal was unusually quiet, save for the occasional announcement echoing through the empty corridors. Among the few passengers waiting to board the red-eye flight was Michael, a weary businessman eager to return home after a long week of meetings. As Michael settled into his seat and the plane taxied down the runway, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. The cabin was dimly lit, the soft hum of the engines providing a soothing background noise. But as the hours passed and the plane flew deeper into the night, Michael's sense of calm began to wane. It started with a subtle tapping sound, barely audible over the drone of the engines. At first, Michael dismissed it as the normal noises of the aircraft, the creaks and groans of metal and machinery. But as the tapping persisted, growing louder and more insistent, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Then came the whispers, a faint murmur that seemed to float through the air, just beyond the edge of comprehension. Michael strained to make out the words, but they remained elusive, slipping through his fingers like smoke. Yet despite their incomprehensibility, they filled him with a sense of unease, a primal fear that crawled beneath his skin. As the whispers grew louder, their words becoming more distinct, Michael's heart began to race. They spoke of things long forgotten, of sins buried beneath the earth, of a presence lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting. And as the plane continued its journey through the night, Michael realized with a sinking heart that they were not alone. Shadows danced along the aisle, fleeting shapes that seemed to materialize out of thin air before fading back into the darkness. Figures moved in the corners of his vision, their forms indistinct but unmistakably sinister. And as Michael's fear reached a crescendo, he felt a cold hand brush against his shoulder, sending a jolt of terror coursing through his veins. With a cry of panic, Michael bolted from his seat, racing down the aisle in a desperate bid to escape the encroaching darkness. But no matter how fast he ran, the shadows seemed to follow, their icy fingers reaching out to grasp him, to pull him into the abyss. When the plane finally landed, Michael stumbled out onto the tarmac, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind reeling from the horrors he had witnessed. As he made his way through the terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being followed by something unseen, something malevolent. To this day, Michael refuses to fly on red-eye flights, haunted by the memory of that fateful journey through the darkness. And as he looks up at the night sky, he can't help but wonder what other horrors lurk in the shadows, waiting to be unleashed upon unsuspecting travelers. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel for more content like this. Your support helps us keep creating awesome content for you.